IVM.
Hey, if you like this show, then you should definitely check out another show on the IVM podcast network called Paisa Vaisa. It's a show hosted by Anupam Gupta that will clear all your personal finance doubts. From mutual funds to loans to SIPs, new episodes are out every Monday.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of IVM Likes. Today I am Rutika hosting this episode, and I have three not so very special guests. People that I watch every day, meet every day. But they're very special when it comes to their own ideas. So there's Madhuri.
Hi.
Who's a storyteller.
Yoo-hoo. See, Antariksh, that's what you say when you welcome me.
Yeah.
Okay, next time.
There's Antariksh.
I love you, Rutika.
What? Okay, now I'm going to... Let's wrap this episode up, guys.
You said not so special. How is that a good way to introduce someone? Madhuri.
Because I keep saying special and then you make these memes out of when I say very, 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 you start making these.
Yeah, and we thought you are a selective listener, so maybe you would not listen to that part and listen to the part where she says that we are special with ideas.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yes.
So Antariksh is a comic. Stand-up comic, and he has his own shows, guys. So you can check him out. He might have a show soon.
Oh, okay, like that.
Do you want to plug in your show also?
I'm doing a show today evening, but this episode will be out on Wednesday. All my shows will be done by then.
You can sit at home and think about.
Do you have a show that's coming out next week?
Yes.
Next week, just follow me on my Instagram. It's at Antariksh T, and I keep updating on what I'm doing.
Okay, so the one guy who butt in when Antariksh was talking about his shows was Darus. He's also a producer, and he's not as talented as Antariksh.
Yeah, I wish I was as talented.
I think she has decided to host this so that she can make fun of all of us in her own ways.
Yeah, I feel like yesterday, it was Tejas' birthday yesterday, and Rutika didn't get any cake. So I think this form of aggression.
I'm taking revenge.
And I thought today I'll get a honey bell when we go down, but it's cancelled now. Yeah. After the way you have treated us. It's
cancelled. My God. Okay, for the sake of Honeybell, I'm going to try and make up for what I said about Darus. Darus is really dead inside. He claims to be dead inside, but he is funny. Wow. He is so funny. Sometimes when Darus says something, you just end up laughing on the floor. So he's also funny.
Only sometimes, guys.
I think I'm missing something. What is Honeybell?
It's a cake. Sponge cake. It's very cute looking, very tasty.
Also, advice to anyone having Honeybell, please take Honeybell and warm it up for 10 seconds and then eat it.
That's
you
like
will
heaven.
Thank me later.
But warm it up where? Under your armpits? In the microwave?
Okay, they'll not come to your show.
Okay, we have spent 20 minutes introducing each other. So let's...
It's not 20, it's 2 minutes.
My sense of... See, time is an illusion, guys.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking, how much have these guys edited already?
Okay, so if you've been listening to IVM Likes, you know the format, but I'm still going to tell you. In the first half of the episode, we're going to give you recommendations, any form of pop culture that we've been listening to, consuming, that we really like, and you will get a sneak peek into the IVM staff room, and you will know what our producers consume. In the second half, we're going to discuss a topic. Usually, it's a topic related to pop culture. And this time, in the second half, we're going to discuss... if we had our own Netflixes or if we had our own streaming platforms, how would we have curated them? So like our wishful thinking, where would it go? How would we have
curated them? What would we do differently?
All of that, customizing those streaming platforms. If we were founders.
Changing the names maybe.
If we were rich enough to be founders of Netflix. But we're not. So clearly we're just going to dream about those things. So we're going to talk about our dreams related to streaming platforms in the second half. Okay, so...
Because that's what we dream about at night.
True. Madhuri, why don't you start with your recommendation?
Okay, I'm going to recommend a book. It's a children's book by Jacqueline Wilson. I have took her name a lot of times on this podcast because I love her. She's my favorite author for children. This book is called Cat Mummy. So, Antariksh, what were you telling me before when I said cat mummy?
I mean, it sounds like a cat wrapped in bandages is coming out of a sarcophagus. I just looked up that term again. Sarcophagus means one of those coffin things that mummies come out of.
Yeah, and you know what, guys? We should all clap for him because he's guessed it right for the first time. Even if he was trying to make a fun or a joke out of it. That's what the book is about. But how? Whoa. How does the author take you there? So there is this little girl who has a cute little pet that's her cat. And her mother has died long back. So this is a child who's being brought up by a single parent. So she finds that mother figure in her cat. The story goes like that. And then eventually, one day, she finds out that the cat is not moving. She's a very small girl. She doesn't know how to deal with death or to accept that somebody would not be with you when that person dies. And she feels the cat will also leave me just like my mother left me. And every time we go and we see her in a burial ground. So she doesn't want the cat to be buried. And in her school, she learned that a cat can be made into a mummy. Like, you make dead bodies into mummy. So she literally makes a cat into a mummy. She tries to put all the preservatives and all. She makes a mess of it. It's a beautiful story. You should read it to find out what happens at the end. Will the people find out around her? How would she deal with it? What will happen to the cat eventually, that body?
But this is a children's book, right?
This is a children's book.
This is
quite
how
dark for
this
a children's book.
You've seen an example of how wild guesses can work when it comes to Antariksh.
Yeah.
Like he just randomly guessed it and it was.
But great, really, like cat mummy, and you are the one who thought ki haan yaar, mummy means so mummy figure.
Yeah, I guess normally, like because it was a children's book, my mind went to, okay, it's probably like talking about a cat mother taking care of her children.
Yeah.
But they went the darker route.
Yeah, and you know, today we had this discussion during our lunch time where Jude was telling us about his pet, Rutika was telling us about her pet, and they had this idea of dealing with the death of their pet. So I thought, why not recommend this book? Because all of us dealt with it when we were very young.
No, and the funny part is, again, not a funny part, guys. I think I have a dark sense of humor. I think you'll realize it. That was the first death I ever witnessed, the death of my pet.
Yeah.
So
you had a pet?
I had a dog.
You had a dog. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. I love the plot.
Have you ever had pets, Madhuri?
No, I always loved stray animals. So they would come and live in our house, but not as pets. So जब उनका मन होता है वो आते हैं, we feed them. We had a cat like that. She would come and she would just lie around, sleep.
Okay.
ऐसे नहीं जैसे वो मैट पड़ा है, आपको पता है वो पड़ी होगी यहाँ पे. She was becoming fat, would eat and sleep, would eat and sleep. Then she disappeared one day. So I don't know what is more tragic, someone's death or someone's disappearance, because you keep waiting. So me and my mother, we would think कि अभी आएगी ना, रात को उसकी आवाज सुनी थी. We would wake up in the morning and have these discussions, and then one day you just get used to the life without her.
You know, I think again, this is going to a conversation
Maybe
again.
She got made into a cat mummy.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think Antariksh was trying to crack a joke.
But it became emotional.
Madhuri was very serious about it.
But be poignant at the same time. Jokes can be poignant.
No, but again, this... you know, with the beauty of having a stray cat or a dog as your pet is that this principle of non-attachment is very important. That because they don't have a sense of home, they think that every spot can be the sense of home. And my friend also went through the same thing, and I told her that, you know, this is where like non-attachment becomes a very integral part of it. It's really hard. I mean, especially if you're a human, we are all humans. But
great, thank you for telling us that.
Wow, first you're calling us first you're calling us non-humans, then you're calling us
humans.
No, first you call us not special.
You're not special, now calling us just
you know
humans.
what, tomorrow she'll walk in, she'll be like, this is how she's going to come and meet us.
Okay,
because she'll imagine that we are those animals. How do you greet a cat? If you think I'm a cat.
Depends on the cat.
I'm a cat.
I greet a cat like I'm greeting a dog, and then I get very disappointed when the cat's not behaving like a dog.
I was telling Darus yesterday that I love like a dog and I feel like a cat.
Oh.
So, okay.
This is like that T-shirt, you know,
nice,
Kanye attitude with Drake feelings.
True. Okay, so let's get to the next recommendation. But tell me this, Madhuri, why do you love her so much? Because I think for the past few weeks we've been having these episodes, and she at least mentions her name once in every episode. So please tell us why you love her so much.
As he said, no, there are such dark topics. How would you talk about it to children? And then having worked with group of children who deal with this in their day-to-day lives. They don't have secured childhood. So all the kids that I got to work with. So I thought these are the stories I'll take to them, and not your pink, bubbly stories, जिसमें bubble gum है, आप इस घर में रह रहे हो, उस घर. Those are very important for their imagination. But I would also like to tell them that, you know, your stories can be articulated too, not just these stories.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Great.
Nice.
Antariksh, what do you have to recommend?
I have another podcast to recommend. I feel like every week I'm just recommending podcasts. I'm just going down my podcast list.
I am going to join your gang.
Of podcasts?
Yes.
That's what happens when you join a podcast company. You just recommend podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. You just so many podcasts anyway. So the podcast I'm recommending is, again, I am not exactly 100% sure that I've not recommended it before, but it's worth recommending again. So it's called The History of Stand-Up. And that's what the podcast is. The history of stand-up comedy.
Wow.
It is basically the first season was the main season. The second season is just expanding on going like more in in concentration into one particular topic or something. In the first season is just 6 episodes.
Okay.
And they start right from the beginning of stand-up and how TV started showing stand-up on it. And the first, like Lenny Bruce in the 1950s being the first stand-up comedian to make it to TV, and then being arrested at one point for using profanity in his stand-up and his routine. So all of that, like how it evolved, and then talking about one of my favorite episodes is Carson, SNL, and HBO. So have you guys heard of? So you guys know the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, right?
Yeah.
You guys know that.
Yeah.
Before Jimmy Fallon, you know who hosted it? It was Jay Leno. Before Jay Leno, it was Johnny Carson.
Yeah, Johnny Carson also.
Wasn't Conan also there?
Conan was there. Sorry, Conan was there for a short time, and then the whole Jay Leno. So Jay Leno. Then before Conan, before him, Conan,
David Letterman.
and then before Conan again Jay Leno, because Jay Leno came back and stole the spot back from Conan. Like this whole huge publicized late night wars thing. Check it out online. It's very fascinating, the whole history of the Tonight Show. But the guy who made it, made the brand that it is, was Johnny Carson. Okay. Johnny Carson was called the king of late night. Or the kingmaker, or whatever you would call it. He was basically called the king of late night. Basically, because what would happen is if a comedian showed up on his show to do a spot. Okay, say like a lot of the bigger comedians we know today, say like Jerry Seinfeld and Kevin Nealon and Gary Shandling, all these people like started because Jay Leno got their careers through the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Because if you made an appearance on the Tonight Show, if you had a set on the Tonight Show and you did well on the set, Johnny would normally give you a thumbs up and that was it. Okay, but if you did really well and Johnny thought you like killed that night, he would call you on to the couch on the as a panel guest. Like literally, you do your set, and he like, hey, why don't you come on down and talk to us? And then you come on down, and the next day you are selling out theaters. You are selling out, like your life is made. You have a TV deal.
Wow.
You have like epic things. Like that's what happened to Seinfeld.
Do we have any Indian version of this? Sorry to cut you midway.
I mean, no, not really. Because even America does not have this anymore. Because this is the time when Johnny Carson was the thing to watch at night. Now there are 50 just talk shows, late night talk shows.
Like I remember Oprah Winfrey's show, then there's Ellen DeGeneres. Do we have those equivalents in India, or can we even imagine a space like that where one person would host a show like that?
I think Coffee with Karan.
I think so.
Well, it's not as
not
that's
as
what I'm
big,
telling you. The way Coffee with Karan is still just celebrities. Where you look at Oprah Winfrey and Ellen DeGeneres, they also go to the idea of masses and inviting people just from your day-to-day life.
What I really liked was, I don't know if you guys remember this, Shekhar Suman had a talk show called Movers and Shakers. And our sound engineer Deep also remember this, it was a great show. And if you go back and watch that I would say was the closest to, not Johnny Carson's Tonight Show, but closest to Jay Leno's Tonight Show, which was still it meant a bit more than it means today. Being on the Tonight Show, even when Jay Leno was on, meant a little bit more. But anyway, so what I'm saying is there's this episode called Carson, SNL and HBO. Then so he talks about Carson, and so how it started was what's his name? I'm trying to just remember this comedian's name who made an appearance on the Tonight Show and made it changed history. Freddie Prinze Jr. Freddie Prinze was a comedian in the 1973. He made an appearance on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show and did a set. He's 19 years old at the time. Okay, this is unheard of to be that young and that good in comedy at 19 years old. He makes an appearance on the Tonight Show. Johnny Carson kills. Johnny Carson calls him on to the panel. Okay, they do one segment together. The ad happens. The Johnny Carson we'll be right back. Ad happens. They come back. Freddie Prinze is still sitting on the couch because Johnny doesn't want to leave. Yeah, still sitting on the couch. One more segment. Johnny says our next guest won't be on tonight, so the next guest gets bumped. Wow. For Freddie Prinze. Okay, so Freddie Prinze next day literally. He is touring the entire country. He's a millionaire. The next day, he has $1 million deals. So this guy was the kingmaker. Because of this one event in 1973, this Freddie Prinze appearance on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, the comedy boom started. This is the first stand-up boom of the early 70s, 80s. Okay, where a whole migration started to LA. To New York. That's where Johnny Carson this thing was. To New York. A whole migration of comedy to New York started happening, where all, like Jerry Seinfeld moved there. David Letterman, Jay Leno, all these comedians who were trying to make it in comedy back then made it there. And that's how it started. So this is one episode talking about Carson. Then they talk about Saturday Night Live and what that did for comedy. Because, okay, do you guys know who the biggest comedian in history was? Have you heard of the name George Carlin?
Yeah.
I haven't.
Yeah, okay. George Carlin is regarded as one of the greatest comedians, one of the biggest comedians who ever lived. SNL, Saturday Night Live. Are you guys aware of this show?
Yeah.
Are you aware of Saturday Night Live?
Yeah, okay. Saturday Night Live, I know.
Yeah. So they every week they have a different host, right? Season 1, episode 1, the host of Saturday Night Live back in 1975 was George Carlin. So that's the biggest comedian. Even at the time then, was the first host of Saturday Night Live. And that is, so basically the first 7 hosts of Saturday Night Live, out of the first 7 hosts, 4 were stand-ups. So stand-up comedians have had a huge history with Saturday Night Live. A lot of the writers, a lot of cast members have been on Saturday Night Live, have been comedians. And then HBO came along. Okay, HBO comes along and suddenly like comedians like say George Carlin and Richard Pryor, their careers are suddenly saved. Because HBO promised uncensored content, where comedians could be like use profane language, use whatever kind of language they wanted to use, show whatever they wanted to use, talk about whatever they wanted to talk about without being censored. So yeah, just check out this podcast. I'm talking about this one particular episode, but this is only a 6-episode podcast, and you'll fall in love. And
how long are these episodes for?
Each episode is about 40 to 50 minutes, not more than that. And they have some really cool interviews. They have Judd Apatow is one of my favorite people to listen to talk about comedy. He makes an appearance. The podcast is hosted by a comedian called Wayne Federman. He is a comedian and a professor of comedy. He teaches comedy and comedy writing. And yeah, so it's hosted by Wayne Federman and a student of his called Andrew Stevens or something like that.
You just summarized and evaluated this so well as if you're writing an essay on it.
No, and I think if you could, if the listeners could see Antariksh's passion, his eyes or his face when he's talking about comedy and podcasts, you would see, because I think because I was also part of the last few episodes. I know that every time Antariksh has to recommend anything related to stand-up comedy. He has this spark in his eyes, and he's like, you say it with so much passion that even though, for example, me and Madhuri don't have any kind of history when it comes to stand-up comedy, or we're not like as interested in stand-up comedy as probably Antariksh and Abbas are, we will still want to check it out because we're like, oh wow, like this man is so passionate.
I'm always interested in the history of these things which start as subculture. Then eventually you mainstream it. Exactly. So with HBO taking it over, it actually becomes a mainstream. And then you start asking questions, is it still the subculture? Would it still practice the values that it had back then? So I would love to check it out.
Just to answer that question, in India it would still be considered a subculture, but not in something like US. It's been the mainstream now, stand-up, for the last like 60-70 years. In India it's still very new. It's less than 10 years old, the entire stand-up comedy scene as we know it.
True. Darus, what do you have to recommend?
I also have a podcast to recommend.
Nice. Podcast buddies. High five.
I'm going to be part of this gang, guys.
Nice. Why do you have to spoil it? It's a suspenseful show.
I don't think anybody's waiting eagerly.
The podcast that I'm recommending is not part of the IVM network. It is a podcast called Sound Exploder. Now, what this podcast does is that, actually, let me tell you who it's hosted by. It's hosted by a guy called Rishikesh Hirve. And what they do is that they get all these artists, musicians, and they ask them to speak about the song that they wrote or they played for. So they add these elements from the song itself. So you have individual elements. So they'll get the guitarist from the band, and he'll talk about what inspired him to actually put in this tune to that song. Then they'll get the drummer, and the drummer will actually speak about why this kind of drum set actually motivated him to create this kind of tune. And they give like a backstory to why this song was actually constructed. So you get like a whole gist of this entire song. And at the end, they play the entire song. So initially you get these momentary elements played to you, and towards the end you get the entire song played. So it just adds another different kind of perception to how the song has been created. Usually when you listen to music, we just listen to it and feel that emotion and all. And they add this technical aspect to it, which kind of makes you like it amazes you to see the effort that people put in, little small sounds as well in the song that can make such big differences so subtly. So yeah, check out this podcast.
Like, have there been any like popular musicians who have been on that we can?
Their scene right now is very indie. Like from the podcast that they've actually recorded, they have a very not a niche, but like very indie kind of bands that have come.
Yeah, very impressive and very intriguing idea, because for sure to see the breakdown is a very unique concept.
What amazes me the most about this podcast is the production, because like to just edit someone talking and then add elements of sound in it and then edit someone else again talk. I mean, I think Deep must be knowing how tedious it is, but what amazes me is the production and just the overall story that embodies the song.
And also everybody wants to, sometimes, you know, when you listen to a song, everybody wants to know what's the story and what's the idea and how it's made and who are the people who are involved. And I think it also helps you understand the anatomy of a song. Okay, one more thing. Is there a favorite episode that you think people can listen to?
Start with.
Wait, I'll have to check that.
And how long has it been going on for this?
This has been going for years. I discovered this through a subreddit. They were just talking about podcasts, and this guy listed all his favorite podcasts, and he's like, you definitely need to check this podcast called Sound Exploder. So I checked that out. I was like, this is literally the shiz. Like, this is one of my favorite podcasts now. But they've been doing it since 2014.
Oh, okay.
And they have many artists. Like, if you've heard of Yacht, I don't know. There's one artist that I would recommend you to listen to. It's called Toro Vai Moe. And I forgot the song that they played, but they have only one song of his that they have actually broken it down to. So if you can search for that, that's a good start to go.
Can you please give us, like, spell it out for us, because
it's Toro. Sorry, Toro, yeah.
He's a Japanese musician.
No, he's an American guy, but he just has like
a weird
name.
Toro.
And then just the letter Y, and then Moi, M-O-I.
Toro Vai Moe. Okay, that's a very complicated and weird name, but
anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find this, right?
Yeah, wherever you listen to your podcast.
Sound Exploder, you said?
Stand-up.
Sound?
It's called Sound Exploder.
Oh, I found it. Okay.
Cool.
Great. So,
Sound Exploder or Song Exploder?
Sorry, Song Exploder. Have I been saying Sound Exploder?
Yeah, I think
all this
while. Oh God.
Song Exploder.
Yeah, it's Song Exploder.
Can we take that line again?
Yeah.
Listen.
Song Exploder.
I didn't know you.
Can't we just patch it up?
Just say.
It's okay. We can.
Okay.
No, that's fine.
You should definitely check out Song Exploder on. It's not on the IVM podcast, but you can check out on any other podcast platform that you listen to.
What about you, Rutika? What do you have to recommend? Yes, I have another podcast. I unfortunately unfortunately for them, I've joined their gang, Antariksh and Darus. So basically, I love listening to any podcast which is related to creative processes, because you want, again, like Darus mentioned, that you want to know the idea behind something, and one of the most beautiful things about this podcast is that you can listen to it, like you can get this information right from the horse's mouth. So the Tim Ferriss Show is the name of the podcast, and Antariksh is making very funny faces right now.
Antariksh is trying to cover us in his stories, but then he doesn't get covered. So he turns his camera, and he's been doing this twice, thrice. I have tried to avoid it, so now I better take his story. You continue.
So the Tim Ferriss Show has a lot of, like, it's a business podcast. Now, I have no idea why I'm not like a person who's interested in business, but I just stumbled upon it. But I don't know if I can qualify it as a business podcast in my head, because I feel like this guy has some very intelligent questions.
Yeah.
Especially when you're interviewing someone, you need to have questions that, if you're talking to someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson, or if you're talking to Neil Gaiman, if you're talking to Amanda Palmer, these are people who will expect you to ask very intelligent questions.
Yeah,
and this guy, the beauty of this podcast is that a lot of people, when they interview someone, they talk over them, or they're like, they interject. So he just lets them talk, and it's like 160 minutes, 180 minutes. You just want to listen to these people talk because they're brilliant people. So the Tim Ferriss show is, he has certain questions which are, very common questions, but certain questions are questions based on the artist. So my favorite episode, the first episode that I heard was by it features my favorite author, Neil Gaiman. And God, that episode, when I was listening to it in the train and I reached office, I was still under the spell of that episode, because he gets into the story behind writing those books and all of the books, not just one book. He tells you the story behind each and every book that he wrote. And there's another episode which I like. You should listen to that one. It's with Amanda Palmer, his wife. But people think of Amanda Palmer as Neil Gaiman's wife, but actually she is a lot more than that. That woman is a brilliant. In fact, I also want to very sneakily recommend her TED Talk. It's called The Art of Asking. And she's a musician. She's also a singer, and she crowdfunds. So she gets all the money through these crowdfunding campaigns. And the podcast, the episode with her, she talks about, they're two very different episodes, because Neil Gaiman talks about his creative process. He talks about so many things. Amanda Palmer, on the other hand, talks about her abortion, how childbirth made her powerful as a person, and all of these things. And, her first miscarriage. So two very, very different episodes. One is very emotional. One is very heart-driven. One is very... it's beautiful, and the second one is even brilliant. It's brilliant as an artist. You want to listen to the episode. You want to know what Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman mentions the ink pen, the fountain pen that he writes in, and the notebook that he prefers to the books and the story behind those books. So that episode really appealed to the head part, my head, and the Amanda Palmer episode appealed to my womb and my heart. Because there's this one line that she says that, when she had her miscarriage, she is somewhere in a remote yoga center, and she's all alone. And Neil is on a trip, his friend has passed away, so he's out. And she's sitting there, and she has a miscarriage on her own. She's just all alone, and she says that process, even though it made me feel very alone, it also made me feel like I could do this on my own and I don't need anyone. It made me feel very powerful. So that's another thing. So that's...
Is this an ongoing podcast?
It is an ongoing podcast, and there are other episodes. The Neil deGrasse Tyson episode, I think you will like, Antariksh.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that.
Yes.
Okay, what's the name again?
It's called The Tim Ferriss Show.
I just recently heard one of his latest episode, and it's so chill. He has one of these episodes where he just interacts with his listeners. So they ask him questions. He'll just be on his porch. He'll be sipping a glass of wine, and he'll be just going through all these questions and just answering back to them. Also, there's this other episode that I saw with Edward Norton.
Oh, yeah.
And they talk about creative thinking. And what I love about this show, exactly what you said, is the questions. He asks the right questions that help the artist to express whatever they want to tell even better.
Absolutely.
And that's so important as an interview. I think that's why people just love the show.
No, and the most amazing part is that those two episodes, or the Neil deGrasse Tyson episode that I'm mentioning, the Neil Gaiman episode, Neil Gaiman actually compliments him, saying that's a very good question. That's a brilliant question. Neil deGrasse Tyson tells him, I'm so glad you asked that question. And Amanda Palmer equally. She really, all the guests appreciate the way he asks those questions. So it's not like you're listening to something stupid. You're listening to something that's enriching you as a person, as an artist, as everything that you want to be enriched by. Yeah. So that's.
I'm checking out the guests on the show, and some really cool people have been on the show.
There are a lot of
Aisha Tyler from who's she's been on. Sam Harris has been on.
Derek Sivers
has been on. Okay, wow.
Yeah. A lot of cool people. Tony Robbins has been on the show.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt has been on.
Yes. Mario Papoa is on the show.
All the famous people on.
Okay, that's the same show that you have sent me the link to. Okay, I'll definitely check this out.
I think you will also like it, Madhuri. Okay, great. So we have finished the first
recommendation round.
First half of the episode. Can we have a recap? Madhuri, what did you recommend?
I recommended a book by Jacqueline Wilson. It's called The Cat Mummy.
Okay, Antariksh, what did you recommend?
I recommended a podcast called The History of Stand-Up. You can catch it anywhere you get a podcast from.
Darus?
I too recommended a podcast. It's called Song Explorer. And you can also Song Exploder.
You said Song Explorer.
Yeah, that's why I kept asking you.
I don't know.
It's okay, guys. It's Song Exploder.
Song Exploder.
Okay, so the podcast that Darus recommended, I'm gonna say it again. It's Song Exploder, and the podcast that I recommended that is called The Tim Ferriss Show. And thank you for listening to IVM Likes. Let's see you on the other side.
Hey everybody, welcome to another awesome week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you are not following us on social media, why the hell aren't you? It's about time that you did. We're IVM Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We also got some really great news about Paisa Vaisa. Anupam Gupta, our host, we couldn't be prouder of him. His show has won the award for the best business podcast at the Asia Podcast Summit. Couldn't be happier, couldn't be prouder. Definitely check it out if you haven't heard it. It is an award-winning podcast now officially. I also would like to thank our sponsors this week, Storytel and Intel. Sponsors make this possible, so please support our sponsors, tweet at them, tell them that you're happy that they're sponsoring the podcasting space. We're excited to announce our new show, Storytellers and Story Sellers, hosted by Vineet Kanabar. Every episode, he talks to two guests, one from the creative side and one from the business side of the entertainment industry. This week, Vineet is joined by Executive Creative Director of TVF and storyteller Saurabh Khanna, and Chief Strategy Officer OML and story seller Tarun Tripathi. Together, they break down what goes into making a branded web series. Tune into new episodes every Thursday. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus is joined by Utsav Mamoria. Utsav is the host of our new show and one of my favorites on the network, Postcards from Nowhere. He and Cyrus have a really interesting conversation about Utsav's fandom of Cyrus. Also, they talk a lot about travel and Utsav's recent marriage. Two of our shows reached their 50th episode this week. On Pulyabazi, Pranay and Saurabh talk to Nidhi Gupta, who researches and teaches behavioral economics. They discuss insights from Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman's classic, Thinking Fast and Slow. And on the 50th episode of Paperback, Rachita and Satyajit talk to the best-selling author Ashwin Sankhi about his perspectives on mythology, history, and writing historical fiction. On the Filter Coffee podcast, Karthik is joined by CEO and Managing Director of Fireworks, Sunil Nair. Sunil shares his insights about Fireworks technology, his time at Alt Balaji, and differentiates advertising for an OTT platform versus television. On Advertising is Dead, Varun is joined by Tess Joseph, a renowned casting director. They talk about her journey in the film industry. On Mr. and Mrs. Binge Watch, Janice and Anirudh discuss the pros and cons of the newly launched Apple TV Plus service and review some flagship shows on the platform. This week on Edges and Sledges, Ashwin, Varun and DJ talk about the first India versus Bangladesh test and IPL transfers. On GBCD, Sunetra and Farad talk about how they face discrimination as kids for choosing to do things against gender norms. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav, who is on Cyrus this week if you have forgotten, talks about witnessing Kerala's famous martial art, Kelari Pattu. And with that, let's get you on with your show.
Welcome back to this episode of IVM Likes. I am your host Rutika and I'm the producer at IVM Podcasts, and we have Madhuri with us, who's also a producer and a storyteller. There's Antariksh.
Hey, what is happening?
And there's Alika.
Hey.
So we had a switch. Darus
has died.
No, Darus is still alive. But Alika is here to talk about the topic that she's very passionate about, and all of us are. So let's talk about our own customized streaming platform.
Yeah. Firstly, the name of this platform should either be IVM streaming platform, because we are at IVM, or just call it Antariksh because then you can receive it from outer space. And I just want my name to be associated with something cool.
Wow. No, I think we would have our personal names to it then. Why would we have your name?
Of course.
We were given a choice.
Wait, is this a collaborative streaming?
That's a question. Is it the four of us making a streaming platform, or is it one individually?
I think we begin with individual, and then if our ideas come together, we can make
so then we
one
copy
together.
each other. It's mine now.
Wait, speaking of streaming platforms, have you guys subscribed to all the new platforms nowadays? Like Disney's apparently just launched.
No, I didn't know about that.
I have Netflix, I have Amazon Prime, and I have YouTube Premium.
What is YouTube Premium?
Yeah, I keep on getting that recommendation all the time. That subscribe to this, subscribe to this.
I love YouTube Premium. Is my most used streaming platform. Not even joking, because I can minimize YouTube and the video is still playing in the background. And the amount of podcasts I listen to, this is great for me.
What does it?
And it also gets rid of these ads because apparently YouTube has started 5-minute long ads.
No, those ads don't come anymore.
5-minute long unskippable ads.
And 2 ads. Sometimes 2 ads and you cannot skip any.
I wanted to watch a 10-minute video and I wasted 6 minutes watching an ad. It's really irritating.
So this is how you take over the world, guys. You start charging. First you make them so addicted to you that you can't get rid of that, and then at the same time you start charging them for.
But if Abbas was here, he would have said, geez, Rutika, they need to make money. From where will they get money?
So let's start with this. Do you guys think though, firstly, that these streaming platforms are a good thing, or do you miss life? Like not having these in your life?
Not really.
And not worrying?
I think it's a great thing that it has happened, because it literally has, the television in my house has become redundant now. Right? And that's the beauty of it, because I don't want to constantly listen to the buzz of television when I'm doing something. I can I can watch it on my own, on my phone, on my laptop.
But don't you miss, sorry Madhuri, don't you miss just browsing through TV though sometimes? Like just, I don't know, like there used to be a thrill, like not a thrill, but there used to be like a time pass in, okay, now let's see what else I can watch now, what else is on. Sometimes like a good movie's on like say Star movies, I'll still go and check it, or maybe Star World is showing something better.
I miss only accidentally realizing that there's a favorite movie and the joy of feeling of joy when I think, so my favorite movie is on Star Plus and I have to watch it. I don't have a choice, so I missed more than half the movie, but I still watch it because I'm like, oh wow, my favorite movie is on.
Of course you miss what is no longer available. So I do miss कि ऐसा दिखता था advertisement में ये movie आने वाला है. So we would actually wait. That is 3 o'clock, it's 6 o'clock. And Saturdays and Sundays were spent waiting for that particular film. But also I wouldn't deny how much content I enjoy today. I did not have so many options. So I would rather enjoy streaming sites. Also, living away from your family, you realize when you go back home, and if you just live with one roommate and she's not in a mood to talk to you, you do need this kind of company. So this content gives you a very good company because it makes you think. It doesn't make you feel alienated, and you don't feel so anxious because you're also thinking at the same time.
True.
Nice. So I think
that's a good
also I don't have to get forced to listen to the news or sports channel because somebody decided they have the TV remote.
Absolutely.
And then they are just going to monopolize it for days.
I get it. No, there are pros and cons for everything, but I'm saying this is one thing that I actually do miss sometimes.
I miss that too.
So how would so that's moving on then. What would you change if you owned, say, Netflix today? What would you change? What would you do differently? Would you acquire a property which Netflix doesn't currently have or something like that?
For me, I think short films. They don't have short films, and I really enjoy a lot of short films on YouTube.
Yeah, very true.
And also, a lot of female directors are getting into this genre. Like Konkana, I really liked her work as a director also, and now she's directed a short film. So I wonder where can one get those short films?
Nice.
They don't come
this film that you're talking about?
Monsoon Walk. Her movie won some prize in some international festivals. I'm just waiting कि वो कौन से platform पे कब आएगा. So if I had to curate, I would also allow spaces.
So do you think it'll come out on YouTube by default, or
I don't know. I'm just assuming.
I think what happens with at least the short films is they firstly, because it's a short film, they want as much audience to check it out, right? That's true with anything that anyone's producing.
Right.
But what would happen if it comes on a streaming platform is that it'll be available only on that streaming platform, and no one on YouTube will ever be able to see it. Is what would happen on that short film.
But if I was to curate my...
Correct. You would make it so that it can be on both the platforms,
Both the platforms. I don't know how to go about it, but I can dream about it.
I would totally make a Netflix into make Netflix follow the YouTube model, where producers earn. Again, advertisement start. I don't know the nitty gritty of it all, guys, but that's what I would do. I would just make it free for all and watch whatever you want to watch.
Yeah.
So basically, I can watch friends whenever
so basically, you would earn from it by crowdfunding or something.
Through advertisers, sponsors.
Varna to tu lut jayega, yaar.
Correct, exactly. How else would I do this?
So okay, great.
But then I would also combine Amazon Prime and Netflix. So I have Jeff Bezos money. To do that, to do whatever the hell I want, do it with my streaming service.
What about you, Rutika? What would you like to have that you do not get on your streaming sites?
I think one of the things that I always want to, I miss is getting educated somehow through this, because of course
getting educated was end of sentence.
No, for example, these master classes that are available of different, like Margaret Atwood has a master class, or all of these master classes.
Nice, very
I feel like that could be also a part of these streaming platforms, because you're going to consume lessons. Of course, not like notes and all of that. That part, is Coursera and all these other sites definitely have been doing those. But they're like a series of lectures by these people, which still exist, because they don't give you these intricate notes about writing, you have to do this, you have to do that. Right. They will talk about the process and everything, but I think if there's a series of lectures by these people or a masterclass, I would really want to binge on this. Like Brené Brown has a whole talk on Netflix, so that's one thing. But I think a masterclass would also work, especially by these stalwarts of their own fields.
I can associate with this. So we had a theory paper in literature classes. We just couldn't understand. They were so complicated. And we had this masterclass videos. I don't remember the guy who talked about these theories. He would talk about Marxism, feminism, and he would not break it very simplistically. He would still sound very complex and complicated. But it made a difference when you're watching it in a video and he's bringing all the examples that will pop on your screen. So I think that's a good idea.
I think there's a word for it called edutainment, or
that makes sense.
Infotainment, or infotainment is a word for it, because I think it's very crucial that we also start. If there's one platform where you can go to, or all these platforms, you can also incorporate the information part of things through these videos. So
What about you, Alika?
So I don't really know much about curating the content, but I want a feature that I would put in my thing. So there are a lot of times when life gets in the way and you've started a series and then you just kind of left it off in the middle, and then you think, 3 months down the line, I should go back to that series. I don't remember anything that happened in it. I want a thing which kind of just tells you, this is where you left off. Here's a 5-minute recap of everything that happened.
That is essential, dude. I would
love this.
No, but again, I'm sure this is your dream thinking, but a 5-minute recap of 5 seasons is very difficult.
But no, that's what they did with Game of Thrones. If someone suddenly started watching from one season, they give a recap and you can make
essential parts of the story.
Essential parts that you need to know to get into this season.
The Hobbit, all of
that's not Game of Thrones.
Wow.
But Alika, what you say, people come up with these questions and then they make those features. So I think
hey Netflix, if you're listening,
hire
get in contact. Get in touch, guys.
Don't hire Alika, guys. We might
give
lose
her a cut. Give Alika a cut.
We might lose her, so just give her a cut.
What is this called? The Alika recap TM.
What is TM?
Like trademark.
TM.
So it's TM'd, guys. You can't take it now.
Okay.
Aliflix. Can you call it that? No, this is terrible.
Okay.
Okay. Let's think of a funny or an interesting name for a joint.
No, but I also have another thing that I wanted to add to it. That Spotify has these playlists, right? Like for example, morning, there's emotions.
Yep.
I think Netflix also should have these categories. Like for example, if you're feeling heartbroken, there need to be these movies that you should watch.
So I forgot what it's called, but
films to cry to.
Films to cry to.
So there are these. There is this service or this website which I forgot what it's called. You have to look this up, but which provides. Basically curates or tags individual things on Netflix, like say movies, TV shows, it tags them in very interesting and very broken down kind of ways. So you can like go down the list. Or today I feel like happy, musical, animated. You can go down like a massive list.
But then it's very generic, very general.
No, but this one is not
specific.
Exactly, this is exactly what it is. It goes very specific if you want it to.
Okay.
So you have to check this out. I forgot what it's called, but there is a service.
Okay, so you have to take another service for it, or it's like a Netflix?
I mean, it's a free service.
It's a free service, and Netflix says you can incorporate it in
I've seen
Netflix
these categories in Netflix, but then I felt it's very generic. It's not very...
Yeah, I'm
okay, that's possible.
Like,
but again, I've heard that Netflix's tagging system is better than other platforms.
Yeah, that's true. Like if I'm looking for one movie, they would give me 9 similar movies, then I would go into one. So that way, whatever
it's like a rabbit hole that they put you into.
Yeah. I
Reference to the previous episode, guys.
Yeah. I watched one anime show on Netflix, and now my entire suggestions is just anime.
Alika, you dragged me into this hole.
You're welcome.
Me too. Like she's dragged us together. But I love your recommendations, Alika.
Yeah. Guys, you should very, very carefully listen to every. I mean, you should be lucky that IVM Likes has Alika sometimes, because she has some amazing recommendations, and me and Madhuri are usually sitting and binging on all of them.
I think I'm living my childhood through Alika.
Yeah, same here.
She has recommended this book to me. It's called as Dark Materials. I'm going to start reading that, fantasy fiction, and also Shira. So there are more recommendations. Hey, now coming to the name, let's think of a funny name. Maybe we incorporate something Alika like into the name.
Please, you're not having my name.
That's very difficult, but
we can just do like our initials or something.
Ra.
Okay, let's.
Okay, what do you think? Let's not keep flicks in the title. Let's not.
That's copyrighted.
So this is the 4 of us only. Okay.
Okay.
So let's take one. The first letter from all of our names. It's A-R-M-A.
Aram.
We cracked it. We are there, guys.
We are coming. Check out.
That took no time at all.
Go check out our streaming platform, Aram.
Aram and chill.
Aram se dekho. Aram karo. Se karo.
What would be the Netflix and chill equivalent? What would be the phrase for Aram?
Aram and...
I can think of something, but it's not safe for work.
Aram and
Haram.
Not really. Wait, what
was close to that?
Okay.
But it's going more with the E instead of the A in the haram.
Kharam हो सकता है क्या?
Kharam?
What does that
mean? Kha ke aram.
No.
God, you know what Netflix and chill is?
Binge watch. She's literally
You've been doing Netflix and chill wrong, Ratika.
They would translate that.
Sorry, I just called her Ratika.
She just Antariksh is officially ruined. I mean, इतने साल तो surname ruin कर रहे थे IVM Likes पे, but अब नाम ruin कर दिया. Rutika कर दिया मेरा नाम.
Yeah, so now for me you're Rutika Yolekar. Both of which are wrong.
You were saying sorry, Madhuri.
You are literally translating binge watch to Hindi version of it.
Okay, let's just keep it Aram for now. And if you want to customize it.
One more thing that I would like on streaming sites. A lot of regional, I'm very sure they're still doing it, not that they're not, but regional content, not only in terms of Hindi, but lots of dialects also. Our day-to-day conversations. I would want more of that content.
But Amazon Prime has that. Like, Amazon Prime has a lot of these movies from the South, and I mean, if you're talking about languages here.
Yeah.
You're talking about languages.
I'm talking about languages.
Also, what would be really cool is to see podcasts. On the platform. Netflix is getting into podcasts, by the way.
Yeah?
Netflix is getting into podcasts.
So wait, how is that going to work exactly?
They just stream it from their, you subscribe to Netflix. And
but there's obviously no visual associated.
I'm sure everyone has the Netflix app on their phone anyway. If any subscribers, right, would have the Netflix app.
Right.
And you can just, on that app, I imagine you can just go to the podcast section. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Yeah. But I don't know if Netflix podcast will be available on Spotify and other podcast platforms, because that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Because Netflix has a different model, right?
Hey guys, one day IVM Likes is going to be on Netflix.
Oh, yes! That's the dream, guys. Actually, no.
Let's make it
on Netflix, though. It's for Aram, guys.
It's for Aram, yes.
Great.
That's a great name, you know. I really like that name. Because Aram. Yeah, because that's exactly what you're doing.
Let's quickly call it before someone listens to this episode and
it's done.
Copyright ho gaya hai, guys.
Yes.
Okay,
Oh shit, I feel bad we missed out Deep. We missed Deep's name in this.
Yeah.
Deep,
Aram
sound engineer.
Daram.
Deep Aram.
He had this in his head and he wanted to crack
No, I
that joke.
didn't. I just
Okay,
thought of it.
Antariksh, we laughed really loud.
Why?
Thank you.
Okay.
We tried laughing.
Yeah.
Let's just say we tried laughing.
You laughed. Hey, you can't laugh as a we tried really hard.
Okay, this is not laugh. This is just pity laugh.
Okay, thanks. Fine. That's all I get on stage anyway. It's fine.
Great. Thank you for listening to this episode of IVM Likes.
Yeah, this was fun. This was, I think, a short episode.
Yeah, I hope
Short
you
second
like-
half.
Very short second half because the first half went too long.
And I hope you liked this episode because we've all been very kicked about talking, we've all
Stuff.
been talking about, customizing our own streaming platform and thank you for listening to it.
And tomorrow, if you find one of these features, you have to come and thank IVM Likes.
Thank IVM Likes and give us royalties, man.
Yeah.
Netflix owes us shit.
Also, if you have some suggestions about how you want certain things incorporated in the streaming platforms, please comment below the episode. It's available on YouTube and any other streaming platforms. And I am Rutika, the host of IVM Likes. This is Madhuri signing off. Madhuri is also the producer
at IVM. I'll plug in my Instagram handle.
Yeah, and you can catch me on Instagram. My handle is that girl inside the library.
She was going to say we can catch me. She was going to say we can catch me.
And Madhuri, where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram at madad13.
Okay, Antariksh, where
catch
can
me
we
if you
find
can at Antariksh T on Instagram.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Cape Fox Alex.
Great. So hit us up. And if
our DMs are open, guys. I'm always waiting for DMs.
No creepy
never
DMs.
Happens, man. Never happens.
No creepy DMs.
Yeah, not for the ladies, but
you can send creepy.
Sorry,
You can send creepy DMs to Antariksh if you want.
No.
Also, hey guys, stay tuned because we'll soon be hitting our 150th
Oh, yeah.
episode.
Oh yes,
Huge things happening. Yes.
That will be a very special episode. So
Correct.
stay tuned and please send us your suggestions on the episode, especially on YouTube. You can send us suggestions in the form of comments.
And before we end, I would like to talk about a new podcast on our network. It's called Peak Planet.
Right.
So right now this is a podcast which talks about pollution and how urban India is dealing with this pollution problem, especially in places like Delhi.
Are we dealing with it?
Exactly. So this podcast talks about dealing with it or lack thereof, and how governments are involved in this. Is basically this podcast is made by this think tank called CEEW, which is the Council for Energy and Environment and Water in India.
Okay.
And it's a think tank. It's a not-for-profit think tank, and they just do these kind of surveys and they do these studies and deep dives into things like pollution and things like what current issues are, or let's say even things like poverty and all. So it's a very, very off today podcast, very current podcast, and it's very
relevant podcast.
Very
Very
relevant
relevant,
podcast.
yeah.
I think it's an important listen, I would say.
Do
check that
definitely
out,
check
guys.
that out.
Yeah.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.
See you.
See ya!
The modern world is obsessed with food and agriculture. Everywhere you look, new and exciting technologies are bringing food innovation to your street market, your grocery store, your doorstep, and your plate. From our quest for the perfect food photos to our rediscovery of ancient grains. Quite simply, food has never been sexier. But guess what? The modern food system is broken. It's a major cause of climate change, antibiotic resistance, and global poverty. So how did we get here, and where are we going? Most importantly, how are we going to feed 10 billion people globally by the year 2050 through better, more sustainable means? I'm Varun Deshpande.
And I'm Ramya Ramurthy. And we work for the Good Food Institute, a global non-profit accelerating the transformation to a more healthy, sustainable, and just food system. The next food revolution is here. On Feeding 10 Billion, we're giving you the inside view. You can tune into us every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Hi, I'm Sarayu Natarajan.
And I'm Alok Prasanna Kumar.
And we are the hosts of the Ganatantra podcast.
On this podcast, we speak to academics, social scientists, journalists, and activists to find out what's actually going on in Indian politics.
On this podcast, we stay away from personality politics, intrigue, and gossip, and instead focus on the data, research, and analysis that drives all this.
So tune in to the Ganatantra podcast, where new episodes are out every Wednesday on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.